So I'm going to draw the anterior intercostal view on one side and the posterior intercostal view on the other, rather than trying to overlap them onto the same picture. So here's superior vena cava, formed by the brachiocephalix. Okay? And the internal thoracic are going to drain either into the subclavian or into the brachiocephalic. Since we had our arteries at the subclavian, I'm just going to stick with that pattern, even though this shows them going into the brachiocephalic. They can do either or, and we'll stick with our arterial pattern. All right, so let's form our subclavians by creating the internal jugular. So here is internal thoracic vein and anterior intercostal veins are going to drain into it. They will be on both the left side and the right side. Okay, one of my students this morning thought they were on only one side because I just drew them on one side, but they're on both. So these would be anterior, intercostal veins. All right, so remember that breastplate that I showed you on Tuesday with the internal thoracic artery right here? And right beside it is the internal thoracic vein. And anterior intercostal arteries will be going out between the ribs, and anterior intercostal veins will be coming back in between the ribs and go into the internal thoracic vein and go back up towards the subclavian and then back into the heart. Okay, so that pattern is exactly the same as the arterial blood supply. It's the posterior system that is different. So our posterior intercostal veins are going to be part of they join together and they're one continuous vessel, all right? So we have our posterior intercostal veins coming back between the ribs, but there is no inferior vena cava up here to pick them up. So instead, they join into a vessel that looks similar to the internal thoracic, but it's on the back. And this joins directly into the superior vena cava. It is known as the azygous vein, and we find it on the right side of the chest. And these would be the posterior intercostal veins. Okay. Now, this azygous vein actually ascends from the abdominal wall, where it is receiving some lumbar veins. And below the diaphragm, it's actually known as the ascending lumbar. You do not have to know that, okay? It is on one of the practice study sheets in your lab. There should be a little star by ascending lumbar. Just azygous is all we're going to care about, okay? Now on the left side, we have a similar vessel. And it doesn't go into the superior vena cava. It crosses over behind the heart and empties into the azygous. And so this vessel is known as the hemiazygous. Okay, so here's the azygous, and here is the hemiazygous. Don't worry about 4, that usually doesn't happen there. So it crosses over behind the heart and carries these posterior intercostal vein blood to the azygous and then to the superior vena cava. These are still posterior intercostal veins. Okay. Now I'll complete this picture with this vessel up here on your sheet, but you don't have to know it, so I'm going to put it in parentheses. Okay? Because we still have intercostal veins up higher above the hemiazygous. And so we have another set of vessels, usually not joined to the hemiazygous, but sometimes, that drain into the brachiocephalic, and that's the accessory hemiazygous. You don't need to worry about that. You don't have to even draw it in there if you don't want to. Okay. So azygous on the right side, draining directly into the superior vena cava. Hemiazygous on the left side, draining into the azygous, and then from that point, getting to the superior vena cava. Now, most of you probably didn't even notice it. We have that vessel on our heart model. 3 vessels drain into the superior vena cava. The 2 brachiocephalics that join to form it. And then here is your azygous. Okay, so these 3 vessels empty into the inferior vena cava. These can be seen, other than that short little piece of azygous vein, these can be seen on the wire models. This is posterior abdominal wall, so you need to look on the back of the wire model. I thought I copied it over. Let me do so. And let me see if I can find it. I move things around making up this quiz, so. Yeah. If you want to find the wire model that you're studying, just do a image search. And here they are. They're in much better conditions than ours. So they're labeled on the right-hand side. But this is looking at our wire model, looking from the back, because remember this is posterior. So here is the aorta with posterior intercostal arteries coming out of the aorta. On the right side, here is the azygous vein coming up and going into the superior vena cava. You can ignore that one. On the left side, here is the hemiazygous coming up and over and draining into the azygous. So when you look on the back of the wire models, you can see that pattern. Okay? And you can tell which is which, because the azygous is going to go into the superior vena cava, and the hemiazygous is going to go into the azygous. Okay? So that's the drainage of the chest wall. Anterior intercostals into internal thoracic, posterior intercostals into either the azygous or the hemiazygous. All right. I'm going to stop here until 4 o'clock, give you some more lab time, all right? And then when we come back, we'll finish with the abdominal veins and the veins of the lower extremity.